Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Something Rotten, Game Query's official Max Payne 3 retrospective. Now, I called it an official one. I should say at the very top, it's not official by any means. I don't know why I said that. We're not
It's official for Game Query.
That's true. This is an official Game Query episode. Joining me is my collaborator on this, Jacob Geller. Jacob, how's it going?
That's me, Jacob Geller. Hopefully, by the time you're listening to this, I've been unbanned from Twitter, but so far, still in the void, so I literally don't know anything that's happening in the world.
Yeah, what should listeners do if they care about getting you unbanned?
Well, first of all, go check out at JakobG42. Maybe it's back. Maybe they did their job. If not, tweet at Twitter support. Tell him to unban JakobG42. Tell him he's a good boy who didn't do anything wrong.
I've tweeted at Jakob42 a couple times, and I'm sure the lovely woman who has that account is very confused.
Jakob42 is like, I guess I'm a YouTuber now?
Yeah, that's right. And then we have a special guest here, new to the Game Query community, the freelance extraordinaire, big rocket ship head honcho himself, and works in the Vice building. AJ Moser is here. AJ, how's it going?
I think some of those things were true. Almost none of them actually were. I'm excited and honored to be invited onto Game Query, a podcast that requires always an intense amount of effort and preparation and planning beforehand, as evidenced by my handwritten notes here and the time that I spent yesterday playing through the first 6 chapters of Max Payne 3.
This is perhaps the most preparation you've ever had to do for Game Query episode.
Almost certainly.
If I may be so bold.
5 Uwe Boll films.
Yeah, that's true. Also, I will say you have prepared 100 times more than I have because I have 0 notes, handwritten or otherwise. So, for the uninitiated, if for some reason you're jumping in on the second episode of Something Rotten, this, like I said, is a Max Payne 3 retrospective podcast. It's set up sort of like a book club where, we're not playing the whole game at once. We're playing chunks of it to let the community play along with us if they want to write in any questions or comments or observations, or just to keep up with us generally. So the first episode, which you can find in the Game Query feed, covers chapters 1, 2, and 3, and then this episode will cover 4, 5, and 6. And without further ado, let's just hop into it. AJ, I'm curious, because you sent me some interesting texts about Max Payne 3 yesterday. What is your, I guess, relationship with the Max Payne series, Max Payne 3 specifically, and now that you've revisited it ostensibly for the first time in the better part of a decade, where was your headspace going back to this game?
Yeah, I have not played Max Payne 3 since it came out, and it's one of those games that has a real foundational place in my memory. When I first experienced it, it was, I think the weekend it came out or whatever it was like, it was my senior year of high school, and I think my parents were out of town or something, and a friend of mine was like throwing a party or something, and I remember going out to that party and then deciding, no, I'm going to go home. First, I'm going to go to GameStop. I'm going to get Max Payne 3. I'm going to play through that whole thing in basically 1 or 2 extended sittings. Really loved it. It's a game that I have a great fondness for, but then I really haven't played it since, even though I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. As I was listening to episode 1 of this here Something Rotten podcast, I texted you. I had said, I was having a Pavlovian response to that podcast. Almost everything you guys were saying was basically completely lined up with my thoughts on the game. I am a big advocate of games that know when to stop, that tend to be on the shorter side. I think like 10 to 12 hours is pretty much the perfect length for almost any video game. I'm a huge third-person shooter fan. Gas up Gears of War, cut down games like, Uncharted, The Last of Us, all of my boxes were checked by that first episode. So I'm ready to just dive into this problematic masterpiece of a video game.
Hell
when you went back to it, like you said, you were in high school when you first played it. Now, you're like in your halfway through your 20s. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the game now that you've had some time to revisit it?
And specifically, if we can start with just how it feels, because Blake is someone who brings this up every episode basically, but like he said last week that it was like oh, this did not play as well as I remembered. Whereas I said, no, it plays exactly as well as I remembered because I played it 2 months ago. But yeah, did it control weird? Were you like used to just how the shooting and moving felt?
Yeah, so the first time I played it was on 360, and this time I played it on an older PC with a 360 gamepad, so the sort of like muscle memory of that all felt pretty similar. I think the sort of, the game actually looked kind of better than I remembered, and I was actually impressed by how well it was running here in 2020, how good some of the environments and the character models in particular looked. Yeah, the gameplay to me, I think, if anything, has really not aged particularly well. Just like on its own merits, it would be the gameplay for me. I think we've obviously made some huge advances in that regard, and I was playing on easy with the sort of aim assist on because I was trying to just get through this, but I did like go back through some of the arcade style levels and like play around with the hardest like permutations for all of those settings and whatnot. And I don't think Rockstar games have a tendency to control very well. I don't like Red Dead Redemption 2 very much at all. I think when Max Payne 3 was still sort of this nebulous idea in my head, I would have said it was my favorite Rockstar game, sight unseen. But I think actually having gone back to play it, it's more maybe in conversation with Grand Theft Auto 4 for me. And now Grand Theft Auto is also not a series I have a ton of admiration for. The two Rockstar games I would say like capital L like are GTA 4 and Max Payne 3. And I think both of them have aged in a way that is like they are obviously imperfect.
The more I play Max Payne 3 right now, and which is weird because I don't remember feeling this way in 2019 when I actually replayed the game again. But replaying it for this show, I actually feel like in terms of modern Rockstar games within the last decade or so, even compared to the sluggishness of something like Red Dead Redemption 2, I think Max Payne 3 is probably the... And again, I'm playing on console, so Jacob, I know you have a very different experience, but I keep coming back to it.
Yeah.
I really think it's one of the worst feeling Rockstar games of the past like decade. Granted, in the last decade, they've only put out like 4 games or something. But I cannot get beyond. Max feels like he's like a 300-pound lead balloon. I have to send through these tight corridors. He's just crashing into everything. But Jacob, are you still?
Yeah, I mean, I
will
will just continue beating this drum that I think this game plays best on PC with a keyboard and mouse, which is I know like a weird stance to take, and usually for third-person games, like I'm not. Usually, I will play first-person games with my keyboard and mouse, and third-person games with a controller, even if I'm playing at my computer, because I like holding a controller and stuff. But for this one. For me, it's the shooting is so precise and so demanding that it just really helps to have a mouse and just be able to like click on a dude's head and knock him out. And I'm not sure. I truly don't know how much is the dozens of hours I've spent with this game, meaning that I know how Max feels on like WASD and how much I actually like it. There are definitely some situations today where can you do the thing on a controller where you switch shoulders? Mm-hmm. Because that's like borderline required, and it always feels kind of weird to me when you're doing it because there are some things where it's like you just have to get like a millimeter out of this window so you can shoot the dude without like 7 other dudes, popping you in the head. And that kind of like finagling, I feel like just works better on a keyboard.
Sure.
But also
snapping Max around, I found was also really difficult. Like doing that sort of like quick turn, you sort of just like are meant to flick the analog stick down, and that was like always stuck for me. I was never able to pull one of those off very well.
Yeah, I mean it's that classic Rockstar thing of like they don't want the character to look weird if you're watching any animation, and so when Max turns around, he will like scoot his feet over in the way that like you would if you were turning around, and not the way that we're kind of used to game characters just like pivoting in place. And And I think we can talk about later in this episode maybe how good that feels for the enemies, because that kind of like very physical mode of movement is amazing when you're shooting people and like watching how they react, but your own movement definitely feels maybe like you're controlling a old washed up drunk, but maybe not particularly satisfying.
I don't want to give it the benefit of the doubt to say that was intentional, but it definitely like embodies that feeling of sluggishness.
I actually, a couple nights ago, I watched a video by YouTuber, I think he goes by Racevic.
Oh, Racevic, yeah. He's got like a million plus view video on Max Payne 3, right?
Yeah, so that video actually dives in pretty deep on why the game feels better on mouse and keyboard versus controller.
I didn't remember.
I wish you sent that to me 24 hours ago.
I am not going to be able to
trackpad, AJ.
I definitely cannot recite all the technical reasons that he offered in his video, but go look that up. I think it's called Max Payne 3 6 years later or something like that. And there are actually videos on Max Payne 1 and 2 that I recommend.
Yeah, he's he's done a retrospective on the whole series, and I would recommend all of them. They're very good.
Yeah, he gets really deep in the controls, and I was like, oh, interesting. Now I know I'm playing kind of at a deficit here where keyboard and mouse have a better experience. Anyway, AJ, what?
I had one big gameplay takeaway from this, and it sort of feels like this is the most appropriate place to bring it up because it's so in line with the conversations that we were having. And the thing that I sort of wrote down here, and this was happening to me right towards the end of chapter 5. So I had been playing the game for about 3 hours at this point and was really in a rhythm with it. And the thing that came up in my head was that it felt as if I was playing a 3D version of Hotline Miami. I was not having a very successful time with those enemies on the docks, and I realized that what I was doing in my mind was like learning through every specific failure and basically building a memory map of where enemies would be coming from, like what I would need to prepare for, and trying to get through that as if I was playing a song or something. You know what I mean?
That's a great point. And I'm sure if you played around with some of the arcade modes, you know there's that New York Minute mode where you have to kill, like every kill gets you time, and so you're running through as fast as possible. And that is absolutely Hotline Miami-esque, where it's like you have to memorize enemy locations in that. You need to know where they're going to be before they're there.
Hotline Miami is also one of the best feeling games on keyboard and mouse, I would argue. Like, I can't imagine playing that game not on WASD, as you say. Like, it's so precise, and when you pull something off, it feels good. And Max Payne 3, for me, playing on a controller, never got to that level of, like, technical proficiency, and I wonder if I was playing with a keyboard, I might have, even when I, cleared levels.
Yeah, that's I am blown away by that analogy because I think it's so good. But let's talk about it more when we get to the actual docks part of it, because there's some like specific shit with that level that I want to get into.
Yeah, so I mean, let's jump into where the story is. Chapter 4 picks up, and it feels like, if you're a Max Payne fan, it feels so good when you realize that you're in New Jersey, which I guess the first 2 games I think primarily take place, across the Hudson River or whatever in New York. But like, same idea. Like, you're back on the East Coast with Max, and it's snowing and it's fucking nighttime, and it just feels so good to like. Granted, the scene does not feel good. It is Max Payne indulging in his addiction, but like to kind of be like, oh shit, I get to go back and be in this part of the country again with this character. It is awesome. And things go south so quickly in a way that almost is comical.
Oh,
it's it's a bizarre and kind of dumb escalation of events.
There's some mouthy Italians that come in, and what Max does is immediately shoots them.
Yeah, AJ, speaking of, what did you text me about that yesterday?
Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate that I was asked on this episode sort of as like as a token perspective, a representative of being born in New Jersey, as someone who owns multiple tracksuits and currently lives in Brooklyn. You sort of couldn't have done this episode without inviting me on and talking about this chapter. there's a strange darkness actually to this. I think it's meant in sequence as the game as sort of a moment of brevity to introduce a little humor and sort of like the Max Payne that you recognize. But a lot of moments sort of stuck out to me as like, this is actually a little like, this is just as uncomfortable as some of the stuff we're seeing in the Brazil sections. Like,
yeah.
Max ends up killing I think his name is literally Tony, which yikes. The thing I texted you, the question you asked me was, I said, damn, this game is racist. You went, yup. And I said, oh, against Italians. I'm on the New Jersey level.
He kills Tony Ravioli, son of mob boss Calzone Ravioli.
And honestly, even worse than him are his like two cronies who are just like in the background the whole time being like, hey, what's he saying? Like,
it's the fucking Italian dudes. It's the Italian dudes from the Amanda Show. Like, they are written with the subtlety of a brick. It is terrible.
Hoboken's finest. But Max like has it out with this kid who's the son of like a local, it's never really specified, politician gangster type who just sort of like, it's implied he runs the town. I think it's literally stated like, hey, my dad runs this town. And Max ends up just shooting this kid because he's harassing him and Paolo. And
Andy then punches a woman in the mouth.
Yeah, that's like completely forgot about that. You know, classic Rockstar moment of violence against women. That's his excuse for it. But you get the idea that he wanted to cap this kid the whole time. And then the dad basically, brings down an entire mob army of it. And when that character is introduced, there's he's genuinely hurt. He's saying like, you killed my son, my only boy. And you have to, I think you have to look at that moment as like, Max is a character who's he's the video game protagonist, right? Where he's just like super cool cop, dead wife, dead kid. He's mad. He's going to get revenge. And how now he's in this precarious situation because he also murdered someone's child. It's sort of like the levels to that did not sit particularly well with me.
Yeah, it's a moment that with like any second thought you start to see is almost unnecessary in its violence and like excess in violence, because basically all that level serves is some fan service to be like, let's go to fucking New Jersey and see this shit. But it's like, we need to get Max to Sao Paulo. How are we going to do that? Well, what if he has a run-in with a mob boss or whatever? But then it's like this game, all the levels in this game are very brief as it is, so it rushes through this moment where Max commits kind of an awful act against this like child, and it's not like the kid was a great person, he hits a woman in the face and everything, but there's just an escalation there that is very jarring, and already in a violent game it almost feels out of place. Jacob, how'd you feel about this?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I didn't think it felt out of place because it is the game where, I mean, we just like in the last section we killed a bunch of people in a nightclub. Like, this is just kind of like, let's find new and interesting shooting galleries to be in. Yeah. It does start, we can talk about the fetishism or not of being an alcoholic. I do love the line, I had been in the bar for 2 hours or 5 years, depending on how you were counting. I think that's a good Max line. It's weird because honestly, my struggle is I really like this level mechanically, and I feel like the setting of the bar is actually a really interesting place to play through, and then like the kind of apartments outside it. And so when I get to this level, I'm kind of excited because I know like, oh, this is one that I like.
For sure.
It is weird. And there are more this is ostensibly kind of a spoiler-free podcast, but it's not the last time we encounter Tony's dad. Right. And there's some like weird extra pathos that goes on there. And so I think you're right to point out that this is a weirdly human moment that is then expanded on even more and has the same kind of like, are they taking this seriously, or is this kind of like do they think it's funny? Is it kind of like playing up this stereotype? It's kind of unclear.
There's a really interesting wrinkle to that sequence. I forget like the exact specifics of it, but Max sort of like mouths off to those kids in the bar, and then the young kid pulls a gun on you, and you're meant to to shoot him as you're prompted there. You can let that sequence play out, and there's like a briefly extended scene where Max like gets shot, and then the kids have a little dialogue and sort of leave the bar. But that really like made me wonder how intentional the sort of rhyme between the tragedies were with Tony Sr. and Max himself there.
I guess when I said it felt out of place, maybe I misspoke. I think just the escalation of those moments weren't handled super well. And I'm like, you brought up the nightclub level, which I get, there's enough justification in my dumb brain. It's like, oh, I got to protect the family. But this is like, it introduces an annoying character and then immediately jumps to this annoying character will shoot random bystanders, but then immediately jumps to Max will then kill a random bystander. It's like a weird escalation of events.
Yeah, and I guess what's also weird is the immediacy with which more people come and start shooting at you.
Yeah,
I think it would have been interesting if they gave a little like, oh fuck, that maybe wasn't a good move. Let's get out of here. And then they're like walking down the street and then some mobsters show up. But it's like somehow there's already a dude with a shotgun on the balcony of that bar where you shoot him. And then they're just like 30 guys in the basement. Like, time to go.
They do leave and come back.
Well, no, the kids leave and come back. I was thinking about like some space between Max shooting him and whatever. It's possible that they could have like prepped, but it does feel... It feels like Max hit the buzzer to start a Max Payne 3 level, and not that he shot a dude, and now here are like the consequences for it.
Yeah, so all that said about the story moments going on here, I will say this level, as a gameplay level, probably my favorite in the game. And I think it's, one, just being something of like fan service for people who played the older Max Payne games. It's like, look, you get to do the thing where you go to the seedy apartments and fight in the snow and all this shit, and you get to be in dirty New Jersey. But another one is just like the level designs are really interesting. Like Max Payne games have, I think 1 and 2 both have all had extended sequences where you fight through apartment buildings, but like they look like old games where everything's very square and blocky, and like actually getting to go through a Hoboken apartment complex at this fidelity and like understand how the hallways and the different apartments will work as a combat arena, I find very entertaining. And then especially the rooftops and the way, like, because buildings are so close to each other in New Jersey and New York, like the way you jump from one to the other, or there's an excellent set piece where you ride a water tower like across a gap of buildings. Like this level is very cool to me in the way they use the setting of Hoboken, that I think is better than basically all the other levels, in my opinion, that we played so far.
Yeah, well, one of the things, and I talked about this a while ago in the video I did called Designed for Violence, which was about, like, you know, video game level design and also real life architecture. But, like, something that Rockstar does really well in this game is you don't look at levels and see a bunch of waist-high cover in the same way that you do in, like, Gears of War. And it is usually there. Like, you know, there are places to hide, but they are really good at making these places feel pretty naturalistic. And like the way apartment hallways kind of curve around, and the way that the roofs are kind of like slightly different heights, and so you can kind of hide behind them, but it also just seems like this is how the buildings were built, really stands out in this level. As like in any other game there would just be like 37 air conditioning units on the roof, and then you would hide behind those, and that would be your cover. And that's not what they do here. And it makes it, even if you're not thinking about it, I think it adds a lot of legitimacy to the place.
Mm-hmm. AJ, you live in Brooklyn.
For sure. The game has a consistently strong sense of place, and everything feels like, you know, realistically constructed, and you can sort of see how everything is put together. I love how in that middle section of this level, you're basically going up an apartment building and then going down a destroyed version of that same apartment building. Now, why that happens actually is a huge problem for me, but we can talk about that a little later. Something that isn't as consistent and begins to rear its head here in a way is just the sort of the bottomless and expendable nature of the enemies the game is willing to throw at you. There's a really insensitive hand wave towards the end of a later level where Max says like, damn, like we're just killing so many people down here in Brazil. And I think the guy he's with says like, oh, well, you know how many kids want really nice sneakers or whatever? It's easy to get those guys to sign up, which is
a big wild
yikes.
Lines in that level.
I mean, Dan Houser, not the most sensitive individual when it comes to his scripts and possibly his life.
Workplace practices, etc.
Yeah. To be fair to the game's credit, that's still happening here in the Hoboken level, where I'm not going to invoke the phrase ludonarrative dissonance, but there are so many guys that you are killing where you're you have to wonder, like, this is no longer realistic. We've sort of I've crossed the threshold in my mind where I'm like, this is not for a game that has such like realistically rendered environments and settings and whatnot, like the amount of human bodies it's throwing at me to kill is just not clicking for me.
I will summon the phrase ludonarrative dissonance here.
I mean, I did
It is weird to me. I mean, I get it, I guess, from a gameplay perspective, like, to make a level, feel like it's justified its time in the player's eyes, you gotta throw, like, 300. It's the Uncharted problem, where a level needs a certain amount of enemies to play through. But, like, this game also takes so many steps for, like, just the feeling of Max to be very realistic, and it comes at the cost of the game feeling good sometimes. Like, Max really has to play through some animations before you can get him to move where you want him to be. And I'm like, I don't understand why Rockstar didn't just decide to make this more realistic in terms of, like, you're gonna kill 10 guys instead of 200 in a one city, like, city block,
I mean, I don't know if that's... I think that it's a fair criticism to bring up because unlike Vanquish or even unlike something like Uncharted, which has like really pretty graphics, Uncharted always makes itself clear that it's a high-flying fantasy adventure, and so to me it makes more sense that it's just like infinite goons there for you to kill. And Max does feel so down to earth in many ways that it's weird, but. I mean, the fact remains, at least for me, that like the pacing of these levels feels super good, and like the rate at which you move through them, and sometimes there are groups of like 2 or 3 people, and that feels really different than if there's a group of like 7 or 8 people. Like it does. I think there is a lot of value to how they've dispersed enemies throughout this level in a way that would be lost if there were more. I think it would have been interesting if we had maybe like a couple levels where you had very few bad guys, but given how this game works and given how lethal combat is, like if there are 10 guys, that's potentially 10 times you click a mouse in the entire level. And I think that this game already does have a problem with you do something and then there's a pretty extended cutscene and then you do something else. And I think I would get frustrated if there was even more cutscene between the shooting, which I think feels pretty good.
Are you saying you think there are too many cutscenes as it is right now?
I don't think I think this series of levels is actually very good, very well paced. There were some. What was the third level last week?
The stadium.
Yeah, the stadium I think is way too heavy on the like how many we need like a cutscene for like them opening every door that they go through. It just seems
there are a lot of little interstitial, just like, oh, this guy's here now.
Which also might be fine if it was my first playthrough. Maybe this is a symptom of me having played through this game so many times that I just want to get to the gameplay parts of it. But I think
I remembered loving the stadium. Like that was one of my core memories of Max Payne 3, and playing through it yesterday I was like, yeah, this is not as good as I remember it.
Yeah, it's a bad level. It's a real bad level. So after Max has his shootout in the bar, this also introduces how he met Passos. By the way, that's something we failed to mention here. You learn how Max came to be with Passos, who's kind of his like right-hand man, and Sao Paulo. They run into each other at the bar Max is drinking at, where he'll later have the shootout. You learn that Passos and Max had been at the police academy together, or at least so Passos says, because Max cannot remember him at all from any face in the crowd. And then Passos has his back when Tony Ravioli comes and puts a gun in Max's face. But those two end up going to Max's apartment complex to try to hide, but then they're pursued by the mob or this army of people. And then there is a very interesting character in this apartment complex I want to highlight. So...
I'm sure you're referring to my least favorite moment of the game that I played through yesterday.
I need one of you to explain this moment to me because I
both
don't
of you
understand
to explain
it.
this moment to me.
So I don't know, but what happens is Max and Passos are in Max's apartment, and then the head of I think it's the mafia, but I guess it's not explicit who exactly he is.
It's a mafia, if not the mafia.
Right? Yeah. He shows up and basically. Passos and Max are like, oh shit, there is an army of goons here to kill us. So we need to make our way from Max's apartment to the city streets to find somewhere they can run while things, settle down. Right outside Max's apartment, down the hallway, there's a great moment where you can shoot from his front door. There's like 2 or 3 guys you shoot, and then as you run it down the hallway, it's just a barrage of bullets following behind you. It's an amazing moment in that hallway. But once you round the corner, you run into what appears to be some kind of veteran.
He has a name.
Yeah, I just looked this up on the wiki, and what it reveals is even more mind-blowing.
Well,
Jacob, character... please take over then, because I'm going from memory here.
So it's this man named Brewer who, to my mind, looks fairly homeless, but is apparently living in one of the apartments in Max's apartment.
In his apartment.
Yeah. And he kind of says some lines to Max. What does he say? Like not really anything substantial, except it sounds like religious ravings almost.
He's talking about you were born in fire, you will be cleansed by fire.
And so
sort of.
and so then he turns the corner and there are some more bad guys, and he throws his jacket open, shows that he's got a bunch of dynamite on his chest, and blows himself up. And then it's this huge, several of the next sections you play through are kind of like in this demolished, on fire apartment complex. Here is what I assumed about this. I thought that this was a character from Max Payne 1 or 2.
Same.
I thought that, here's this weird guy who probably fit in more in the kind of, a little more absurdist, Remedy games, and Rockstar are bringing him back in to give some closure and then blowing him up. I looked on the wiki. That is not the case. He is a new character for this game, and that blows my mind.
Well, it looks like he might be introduced in. I haven't read it, so I don't know what capacity, but it looks like he is in the Max Payne 3 prequel comic as well.
Sure.
Yeah, but that 0.01% of us have read.
I've been meaning to read it and haven't, but it's written by Sam Lake and Dan Houser, so it might be pretty good.
The art in that is pretty cool.
It's an interesting writing team.
Here's my take on this sequence. This is why I fucking hate Rockstar's sense of humor. It is much more miss than it is hit for me, and it's sort of this so random, a little offensive, are you offended kind of jabs at there is no target that is too low or too out of bounds for the geniuses on the writing team of this particular project. And of course there would be a potentially mentally handicapped homeless veteran who does a really epic bomb out on the mobsters who are attacking you down. You'd never see that coming, right? Isn't that so fucking quirky and out of nowhere? And it's played as this, it's wielding disinterest in such a way that I can't get on board with it, where it's just sort of oh, don't worry about this guy. He's only here to say something really cool and then blow himself up. And then you get on with the shooty shoot. It was just a strikingly not cool moment for me.
Yeah, I don't think I'm as struck by it as maybe you were, but it is a moment that when it plays out, I am like, this is so unnecessary. And even you can go into his apartment and find his manifesto and look at his walls, which are like covered in newspaper clippings about like cops and all this shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, it's covered in newspaper clippings about Max specifically.
Is it? I couldn't tell because I was looking at them.
There's a picture of Max from Max Payne 2, like on the wall. Like it's a funny kind of like low res face.
Okay, I looked at him. I guess it just didn't stand out to me that was Max. But okay.
Well, here's my take on I think what they thought they were doing here is that I think this is supposed to be a potential road that Max could go down. You know, Max as a traumatized man with substance abuse problems, living in an apartment in Hoboken, like could end up kind of as crazy and rattled as this dude. And maybe Max doesn't really, maybe part of the problem is Max's reaction to it in that he doesn't really seem to have much of one. But I feel like this is supposed to be a kind of motivation for him to like get back out there and start doing something because he doesn't want to end up like this guy. But I think that's both on the nose and not underlined enough in a way that I don't think is done particularly effectively.
I think I could definitely buy that, but also think if that is the case, that sucks because that's like Dare level fear mongering, you know, where it's like, this is your brain on drugs. It's like, come on. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird moment that I feel like stands out. There's some quirky characters throughout the game. There's the guy you can find in the nightclub who's in the bathroom, who's like a ex-Denver cop or something, and he's showing you pictures of his family. Like, that stuff reminds me of weird, like, quirky characters you could find in Max Payne 1 and 2, and there's a lineage there with, like, Red Dead and GTA where they're the freaks out in the world. But this one just comes off as this weird, like, sidestep that this game doesn't need to take. I don't need a Unabomber halfway through this level. Very weird.
To me, it feels really just like a Grand Theft Auto plotline, and kind of my distaste for that series is that it feels like everything is just like a woohoo, like wouldn't this be kind of wacky and edgy? And Max Payne 3 does a lot of that, but I think this does stand out.
That might be a product of something I actually really like about this game, which is sort of when you're given control, it is to dictate the action and pretty much nothing else. If this was a different kind of game, like you might have the opportunity to have talked to this character and go through some dialogue like options and whatnot and learn a little bit more and get the proper context there. But, you know, Max Payne 3 is only interested in giving you control when it's time to get out there and do the shooting. And so that, like, you know, a character like Brewer could maybe be executed more effectively, let's say, in a game that gave you the authority to go out there and have conversations with actual NPCs like a Grand Theft Auto or like a Red Dead.
Jacob, have you played Grand Theft Auto 4?
No. I've played like the first 2 hours of it.
Well, AJ, you brought up that you're a fan of GTA 4, even if you're not a fan of GTA 5. There is a moment in this level, and this is just a quick aside, where when you finally end up on the rooftops, you see Rockstar's 2012 rendering of New York City.
Hell yeah, baby.
And man, it just
the Big Apple,
me want a new Liberty City so bad, because like it's hard going back to GTA 4, but like even the fidelity in those 4 short years are like night and day for Rockstar. Seeing it in this game, I was like, fuck.
Oh yeah, no, the graphical difference between 4 and Max Payne 3 is bananas, and part of that is obviously that this is a very linear game where they control exactly where you're looking. But yeah, it's like the character models, as AJ was mentioning in the beginning, they are good now, and I imagine seeing them in 2012 would have been mind blowing.
Seeing that skyline, man, it just.
One thing, if I can start talking about something that I like, the storytelling wise, that this does, this level particularly made me notice. So you're in a shootout, and the last bullet will do like a bullet time. Usually it follows it, or it shows the guy being shot, and it does like a slow-mo kill. And I always thought, oh, that's cool. And I never really thought more about it. But like, then it goes from that instantly into a cutscene a lot of times. And it's so little, but it's so effective that you don't have to. Sometimes you have to like walk to a place and then a cutscene starts, but I love how effective it is that it's just like this happens and then instantly you're on to the next thing. You don't have to wander around in this like arena that you were just shooting people in, because it will as efficiently as possible get you to that cutscene and then get you to the next place you're playing. And I had never really realized the utility of those little like bullet time kills until this playthrough.
I very much agree. I really like the delivery of the story in this game. I understand where people are coming from when they, criticize the amount of cutscenes in it, because there are a lot. Personally, I don't mind them. But to a point of AJ's earlier, where he said this game is very much like Hotline Miami, where you're kind of memorizing the enemy placements. Something like that requires a lot of trial and error, and this game basically lives and dies on the pacing of its story, because it is so intertwined with the gameplay that I do not enjoy the trial and error, especially on console, of the gameplay in this game, where like there are some combat arenas where it's like I may need to try 4 times before I finally figure it out. And then the pacing that it's been, building on with these cutscenes that interrupt the gameplay a lot of times, like it completely destroys that for me.
You definitely benefit by having those load times shortened down. And I remember in my initial playthrough, like on the 360, this game came on 2 discs. Like it was pushing the limits of the old Xbox 360. But yeah. To like elaborate on that a little bit further, something that I really, really respect about this game is that it is not inherently cinematic, and that might sound wrong at first just because of how many cutscenes and how much story there is in here. But what I mean by that is it's not a game that is particularly meticulously directed in the way that we were talking about God of War 2018 is, where it's always telling you where to place your eye and is always like casting you in that direction. The cutscenes in this game are very like scattershot and edited in a way that they will use. Someone in the Discord was comparing its presentation to comic book panels. It'll cut through. It's very aware of when it is a video game and how it's delivering that story. I love the way too it'll pull out random phrases of text and put them on screen. That's just a nice little nod. That's sort of like acknowledging the medium in which it's being delivered. But as Jacob was saying, with the slow-mo shots and the diving and the dodging and the way those will seamlessly blend into the story sequences, it's sort of letting you decide as the player what becomes cinematic, what slows down, what connects those threads. We've put all the work into making these cutscenes and the story segments, but you are sort of like in a figurative director's chair where you're figuring out how we get from those sequences to one another. And that's something that very, very few games have done in the way that Max Payne 3 does here. And that's again, why I feel like I've talked this game down a lot so far on this appearance, but I do really love this game.
And I think that's where some of the control awkwardness actually really shines in that respect, because one of my favorite things, and I know I talked about this last episode, but I just want to highlight it again, is when you dive, you have to make Max get up. And there were several times in that New Jersey section where I dove to the floor and then just stayed laying on the ground, kind of like shooting guys, and I did it because it kind of felt advantageous, but also it just feels so weirdly in character as this guy who is, even though he's doing action hero shit, is not really an action hero. I can't remember the last time I just like laid on the floor, not prone, not like a Call of Duty like I'm stabilizing my barrel, but just like, because it's a lot of fucking work to get up, and if I take that time to get up, I'm going to get shot. So I need to just like stay here and finish the job. It's so specific. It's such a specific choice, and I really, really like it.
I want to call out just the camera work of the cutscenes in this game, which largely I don't know if it actually is shot on Handycam, but it looks at least like it is.
Well, no, Blake, it's digital.
Yeah, right. Well, cutscenes are still filmed. They still use lenses and different cameras. But this movie, this
he did it. He did it. Folks.
What does that say about this game?
The mask is dropped.
It's like
Blake's
the camera
watching a
work of
playthrough on YouTube.
That's right. It looks like it has the camera work of like a Cloverfield at times. Like it is all over the place, but it kind of amplifies both Max is not always kind of being there. He's not really stable mentally or physically in this game, but also a lot of the franticness of a lot of the moments. And I really appreciate that Rockstar went with just like this very chaotic Handycam.
Yeah,
I'm trying
basically
to
all the cutscenes.
If there are there any cutscenes that have like what we would call like crane shots or helicopter shots, or it's like
sometimes
everything...
you do. Yeah, when there are like larger groups of enemies, like introductions in particular. I think when the like mobsters are introduced, it's from an overhead perspective. But like again, it's very quick cuts. The game is always jumping. The way it delivers its cutscenes are usually very quick.
It
edits.
certainly doesn't have any like kind of impossible camera tricks. Like, you know, there's nothing where they are taking advantage of being in a video game to like zoom through, do some kind of like panic room shit or whatever. Like it's all just like this was a guy standing there if it was real. This
might be some Galaxy Brain shit, but you know, the Sadfi brothers have not been they're like pretty vocal about how much they enjoy video games. I would be curious to know their take and or possible if there's any influence by, you know, Rockstar, especially like Max Payne 3 or Grand Theft Auto that they may have taken. I don't think it'd be overt or that much, but
GTA 4 for sure. I would bet money on that. I mean, like that has big good time energy in some key moments.
The camera work of Max Payne 3 very much feels like Good Time and Uncut Gems-esque, where
some of those hallway sequences in Uncut Gems, yeah.
You know, Dan Houser would just cream his jeans if he heard that.
Right, but no, that's a thing too, is that games have a very limited language when they want to be cinematic. They sort of ape the tropes of things that are successful, and in the way that like it's gesturing at the best thing you can say about a video game is that it felt like a movie, right? That's a very tired like bit of criticism and bit of sort of like acclaim for games. Big budget shooters of Max Payne 3's ilk are defined by their set pieces, by how big and how capital C cinematic they can be. And I think reflecting on it, the sort of like lasting image of Max Payne 3 is the character dual wielding Uzis diving in slow motion in a really tight corridor with this wobbly camera angle. All of the like defining moments that give Max Payne 3 the legacy it has are what come in between the pre-prepared set pieces. There's no Uncharted 2 train sequence for Max Payne 3. That's not the thing that you love about this game. It is all of the gameplay in between it.
Moving on to the next level, when it tries to do some kind of train sequence
it's not great.
It feels pretty rough. So
when the game starts hinting that I'm going to get on a boat, I am not excited. I am very anxious. I say I do not want to do that.
Yeah. So do you want to let's go in the jungle. Let's go to where is this? Where does it take place?
The something river. It starts with a C.
It looks like the Tiete River, according to the thing. But
sure. I only played it yesterday.
This is a story jump that I realized in this playthrough I had no idea why it happened. And I had just never thought about it before. So someone...
Oh, what do you mean?
Like, why does Max end up here? Just explain that to me.
Oh, he's going to track down Fabiana, who's been taken by the Crusha Preto, and that's... I don't know how he gets intel that they are there. You get the name of the gang in an earlier cutscene, I believe, in the stadium level, or maybe the second level. But he's going to find Fabiana, who's been kidnapped.
This is a first sort of time skip you get. Like he says, it's been a few weeks or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
or days maybe.
But I don't. Is she captured in? I can't remember the. Is she captured in the club level?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For some reason that
because
like
that they're at the stadium to hand off the money to get her back.
That's right.
Sour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I feel dumb, but I mean honestly, it's like this. To me, this feels like
jarring.
Max just ends up in the jungle, and it's
very disorienting.
Yeah.
It is jarring, especially the way we're playing it, where we ended on a time skip. So it's like we stopped playing last week, then loaded the game this week, and we had to jump like 2 years back in time in the story, then jump 2 weeks ahead of the level before that. But yeah, he goes to basically, I guess it's the... I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but not the paramilitary group we met in Chapter 3, but the gang that's established in the first 2 chapters and is also in the stadium level, because you have like 3 different groups kind of fighting each other. And that we are going to the jungle compound, as it is, for the... I think it's pronounced... I'm not going to do it.
The bad guys.
To retrieve Fabiana Branco. I really like this level. I don't even mind the boat part, even though I think it's weirdly paced. There is one moment of this level, though, that has eluded me every time I've played this game, and it's very early when you encounter the first 2 enemies. They're like unloading a truck, and the game gives you the option to be stealthy. Have you ever killed them stealthily?
I wanted to talk to you about this. You can get surprisingly far being stealthy, but it is unbelievably difficult.
Okay,
it doesn't make sense. Go on.
I was just going to say, I have tried multiple times at the first 2 enemies of the level, not just this playthrough, in other playthroughs, trying to just kill them without alerting anyone, and I've never been able to find out a way. And yesterday when I was playing it, I was wondering if it's just impossible. If the silencer is an illusion.
It's not only this one. It's actually several more groups of enemies you can get through silence.
Oh,
but it's so what this game does is it presents their dudes unloading a truck onto a boat, and the truck has like a brake that you can shoot out, and it rolls down and like hits one dude, and it seems like that's the way to take them out stealthily, but it's not, because as soon as you shoot the brake, the dude like sees you and starts shooting at you. So you actually just have to incredibly quickly shoot both of them. And basically the way that it decides if you maintained stealth is like, does another guy get a shot off? And that happens incredibly quickly. It's very weird that they give you almost it feels to me like a gameplay decision that they kind of played with and then decided they weren't going to focus on, but like left it in halfway.
Yeah.
Max gets a really neat costume change here where he's like got a tactical, like traditional sort of like
Sam
assassin,
Fisher,
or
he looks like an action
figure. An operator or something, right?
Yeah.
I ditched that silence pistol as soon as I possibly can, just because I'm not interested in Max Payne 3's version of stealth in the same way that I'm not interested in Max Payne 3 as a sniping game in that stadium section. I'm like, this is not what I signed up for, guys. This is not what we're here to do.
I like this level a lot just because I think it's a cool like middle ground between the very bright and almost open levels that you're in for the first 3 chapters, and New York, which is like a lot more claustrophobic. There's a lot of interesting corridors but more open arenas here, and also just the like rain and the forest is just cool visually. But what I think this level does, ironically, despite the conversation we had earlier where talking about how Max just kind of kills this kid in a bar, I think this level is what introduces the brutality of Max Payne 3, which will definitely come back later in the game, because they don't really show anything super explicit, but just the views you get of Fabiana Branco, who is being tortured by this group, are really fucking hard to look at. Like, and you're not necessarily seeing her being tortured or beat by this group. You're just seeing her, and she is like in really rough shape in a way that is very troubling, and I think indicative of some of these like visuals this game will give you later in terms of just the human body being absolutely destroyed. Did that sit weird with you all, or is that something you didn't notice?
That's something I paid a lot of attention to. I noticed a lot how the game like isn't interested in doing wish fulfillment, like action hero fantasy.
Yeah.
It elevates Max's competency to such an exaggerated degree, and then like is very interested in asking what would the cost of that competency be, right? If Max Payne was this angry and this good at killing people and getting out of these like life or death situations. You talked about the like nihilism of this game a little bit last week, and it's sort of like the game is saying to you like, sure, if he could do this, like this is what would happen. And he meets a really interesting foil with this group whose name we're not sure how to pronounce, but it's sort of like they will go to the people who are in
Commando
charge.
Sombra? Is that the group or is that a different group?
No, it's the Crochet Prado. There's two groups. I think the Commando Sombra is the paramilitary.
All right, go on. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Right, but they'll push against you in the same way, like that you get the sense in the cutscenes here too that Max is like, it's very difficult for him on this boat ride to be taking on these guys and tracking down this girl. Like he's not Rambo or whomever your favorite kind of like action hero is. This is actually putting him through a very intense toil.
I think this, like, it's honestly, I feel like every level up to this is easy to play it through as if you're like fucking American badass. Like, you're diving off roofs of buildings and doing all this crazy shit. And then this one, it's just like, it starts to show how mean this game can be, especially because like Fabian is only there because Max like fucked up and wasn't able to save her. Like, he had multiple opportunities to do that, and and then you're hit with another scene like in the next level that is just like brutal. Like, I forgot how brutal this game is, especially there's a twist later on in the game that I think cements that brutality and just like how far they were willing to push just the absolute, I don't know, hostility of this world that
and
first struck me in this level.
It is worth mentioning that Rockstar seems to use violence against women to sell games sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that a big talking point among kind of the like anti video game crowd was like, you can kill hookers in Grand Theft Auto, which has like never been, it's like, well, technically you can, but you can kill anyone in Grand Theft Auto. It's not like a mission objective. But in this game, it like Fabiana's like on the cover of it, even though it kind of doesn't look anything like her in-game model, like being kind of held by some dude. Like it seems like it is, we're establishing the grittiness of the world, and we're doing that by showing how beat up this woman is. And I think that it's not out of nowhere. Like, she is an important character to the plot, but it's also, I mean, this is literally the topic of like a, feminist tropes versus video games episode, is like using violence against women to establish not really anything about the woman, but just that like the world is mean.
Yeah.
Here's something fascinating about that too that I realized through my sort of lack of skill with this game, is that towards the end of this level, where you get closer to your enemies and to Fabiana herself, you can actually kill her if you are not conscious enough of your gunfire. You can get a fail condition where you shoot her, which is like it's the same content as a Grand Theft Auto game, where like you can kill women, you can incite violence against women. In the case of Grand Theft Auto, it's sort of if you're the wrong kind of person and find out, you can go kill the hookers. Like, that becomes a selling point to the game for you. Max Payne 3 does not present it in the same way. It's not a good thing to be done. It gives you like a pretty explicit fail.
Yeah, I do want to be clear. I think Fabiana used as like the hook to show how cruel this game is. It's not something I particularly thought was used well. It's just like, it's a character who's basically in this game is like, we're going to tell you her name and nothing else about her. Now we're going to beat the fucking shit out of her.
And you want to save her because she's a girl, and you're an action hero, and action heroes save the girl, right?
Yeah.
I guess so.
Now let me change topics wildly and ask you, AJ, someone who has some experience with talking about music. I felt like this
Sure.
level was when, I mean, I like the whole soundtrack to this game, but I felt like
Big
this
whips.
level,
Let me get on the record.
in particular, the soundtrack really started popping off, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about Health and their work on this soundtrack.
I love Health. I love their work on this soundtrack. And I honestly think more than anything, why this is the moment where I started to feel like this is Hotline Miami-esque is just because of that groove. You're so in the headspace where the music is circulating. You're going through these same routines and it all feels like that way. I busted out, the best pair of headphones I had to play this game yesterday. And like the game sounds great. It's sort of, I love the way that this soundtrack is designed to hide beneath gunfire and explosions and whatnot, because the gameplay, the moment-to-moment gameplay, is so consistently loud and noisy. And I think you're not going to find a better band to do that than Health. Like that's one of the most perfect pairings, and I love how consistent that is. I think in this level too, the game starts to incorporate, or the soundtrack specifically starts to incorporate some like flares of Latin American music. You have like really it's mimicking like what a stealth game soundtrack might sound like, and so you get some of the like the tittering and sort of like the hushed cymbals in some of those early stealth sections, and then when it gets really bombastic there, especially on the boat ride, it's just so like thrilling and keeps the momentum going really well. It is a long sequence where you're on the boat, but it certainly doesn't feel like a long sequence if you're playing it correctly, just because of how like forward and fast the whole thing feels.
Well, here I want to share a story about Health real quick. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this more. Okay. But back when we were allowed outside, there was this like big
when Max Payne 3 came out.
Yeah, there was this big electronic music festival that happened in Durham, in my hometown, and I have this just like uncanny memory of standing on my parents' back porch, and over the trees wafting came the song Tears from Max Payne 3, and I realized that Health was actually performing like so close to their house, and they were playing that song. It was just, I was like, this is from the video game. No, you guys don't get this. I was trying to explain to my parents why it was cool that there was a band playing a video game song nearby. But yeah, I really like the soundtrack, and yeah, the boat sequence, I guess, is basically on rails, and so they can score exactly to it. They know where you're going to be in each beat, and so yeah, it really stands out there.
How do you all feel about that boat sequence? Because I feel like it's a section maybe a lot of people do not enjoy because of how on rails it is, but I kind of like it. It's just like a big dumb action movie moment that I kind of
my problem with it isn't it being on rails. My problem with it is just that like the angles at which you're shooting are not the most precise. The enemies are not as clearly defined and visible as they tend to be. Like it's hard to know what you should be shooting at sometimes, especially when like you're zipping past a log bridge that's hanging above you, and I'm just sort of spraying upwards, and I'm like, I mean, the game didn't stop, so I guess I did my job, but I don't know if I made contact at all.
I like the moment where the boat drives through the house, though.
Well, that fucking rules. Come on. Every time a boat drives through a house, I love it.
They show off some really good, I think, destruction physics here, because there are a couple houses that blow up, and every time they did, I was pretty impressed by like what looked like pretty... It wasn't like there was a cloud of dust and then there was a model of a broken house there, the way that destruction works in a lot of games. It was like you could see the different pieces going in different directions, and I thought that was pretty impressive. I just think it's too long. I think it's fine. I think that, that there's a section where a bridge blows up in front of you, and then you have to turn around and do like a more section of shooting, and I'm like, just don't blow up that bridge. If that was just kind of like where, it's like, make that be the climax, and then you can still do the whole jump through the house thing. It seems like they just added on like an extra 3 to 4 minutes for whatever reason, and I don't think it was necessary, but I like that they have sections where you like the feeling of you going really fast and shooting at another boat going really fast, like through a line of kind of like trees and vines and stuff, is difficult, but it's also just like a really interesting visual that I feel like I haven't seen much in games, and I really enjoyed it. So I think it's done about as well as everything else. It just overstays its welcome.
So at the end of that moment, Fabiana gets away with the leader of this gang group, and then we flash forward maybe a day or two in time, and we are at the Bronco headquarters, the very sleek office that this family operates out of. And when I got to this moment, I remembered not liking this level, and then I played through it for this, and it is still very frustrating in my opinion. But also, I have changed my mind to this level kind of.
Big agree. I really like this level.
It's a point in the game. I think I mentioned it with the stadium, which I guess is just going to be a talking point for the rest of this series. Is just that damn stadium, where the gameplay can feel at odds with itself. Like, I was definitely, we can get into it maybe in a second, but there were definitely moments I was very, very frustrated. But also, like, there's just a lot going on in this level that works really well. We mentioned the level before, being very brutal and mean. This level has a lot of brevity to it, and it's actually like kind of funny at moments. And then it shows you a man with his leg blown off who's like choking to death, which is really, really horrible. But there's a lot going on over the course of the like 20 to 30 minutes you're here that I think works really, really well.
I agree. I think that shooting papers is fun. And what this level does is you just shoot through a bunch of cubicles, and all of those cubicles have so much shit on them that during these gunfights, there's just like stuff in the air everywhere, and it feels, to use the callback that everyone always uses, kind of feels like the Matrix lobby scene where it's like there's just so much debris it's really fun to just feel like you are just completely demolishing this office full of regular old office equipment.
There was an old Max Payne 1 mod that was just the Matrix lobby scene. That was a great mod. I recommend anyone try to dig that up if they can. Second is, this game will reward you at some points in that office by a grenade blowing up but not killing you, and just the greatest particle effects of wood and splinters and glass and paper all at once flying around you. It's amazing. I died a ton of times in this level, and that's where the frustrations came from. There is a weird thing with this game, and I guess ammo scarcity. I keep running out of ammo, and then the enemies in this game are so dangerous that to try to make a dash to find another gun is basically a death wish. It's basically just guaranteed that I will die and will have to start over and try to do it without running out of ammo. Also, the leaps and jumps that Max does in this game with bullet time, they're very far. Like, when you do one, like, you kind of clear some distance, but the second you hit any geometry, it completely fucks up your jump. Like, you fall out of bullet time and you kind of crash to the floor, and that's cool. It's realistic. That's how that would actually happen, I guess.
Yeah, when you hit something, you stop slow motion. That's how
exactly. If I jumped across my room now, the bullet time would stop if I hit the wall. But for a game, it kind of sucks big shit. That really annoys me when, I'm contending with like 10 different enemies in a small room. How dangerous any one bullet is. Already ammo scarcity, and then it's now, making this one mechanic I have that could get me out of a jam be that much more complicated on top of everything else going on. And this level in particular, I kept having that problem. I think like that first office you go to with all the cubicles, I want to say that one alone took me like 4 or 5 times. Which again, not a level I dislike. I like it a lot, but I was at my wit's end with a few moments of this part of the game.
Yeah, this is where it really starts to feel incredibly like a video game. For all of the dramatic
Yeah.
flair and that sort of cinematic effect I was talking about, this is still the sort of thing that is keeping a progress tracker on how many dudes you're shooting in the nuts. You know what I mean? The ammo scarcity plays into that too.
Is it really?
It definitely is. Below the belt is an achievement I got
did
that
not
popped
know.
up during this.
Wow.
You just got to get good, Blake. Maybe you should focus on where you're shooting those dudes.
Sorry, I'm clicking on foreheads only when I'm playing this game.
I think like in
it.
a Breath of the Wild-esque way, you're meant to be just like picking up guns on the fly from people you're killing as you're moving forward through this.
Yeah.
To what you were speaking about with the slow motion stuff, I love how the game is willing to put up a wall between Max and the player. I really like how a lot of his dialogue is like narration in a way that is enlightening to you as like a listener. You get the sense that you are not embodying Max Payne. You are merely controlling him, sort of directing it as if it was like, this is how it always happened. You're just engaging in the shooting, but that's also speaks to the thing I was talking about with his like hyper competency and how the game is very aware of that and wants you to be very aware of that. You can do all of these really stylish dodges and dives, but you can also just as easily get killed and fail these sequences. And I love how the game is never hesitant to return to that well of just really kicking your ass if you get too confident or too cocky, which I definitely did here.
I guess that's the issue for me, is I am never certain when this game wants to be Uncharted or Gears of War and when it wants to be Max Payne and some of
To
these
me,
levels.
the entire time it feels very confident in being Max Payne 3, just to like put that there. I don't think it toes the line between those two franchises in particular just because of the time it's coming out, I think very delicately, but it still holds up now in 2020 as a very well-defined and self-confident game, at least in my view.
Well, I guess the thing I'm struggling with is going into a combat arena and it taking me a couple tries to figure out, okay, in this one I need to be more stop and pop versus, okay, in this one I need to be John Woo. Like that's something, and maybe that's just on me. Maybe it's a mix of playing on PS3 and the controls already being a little shitty. Like, but that's something I'm coming up against a lot, is not knowing how exactly to tackle a room and me having to die a bunch of times to figure it out, which is like frustrating for me.
That's reasonable.
But Jacob, again, I feel like you probably have the opposite just by nature of playing on mouse and keyboard.
There is a weird rhythm you have to get into here where it's like cover is necessary, but also if you are like stopping and popping is weirdly too risky because usually you are exposing yourself more. Like to me, I would estimate that I kill 70 to 80% of enemies in bullet time, and usually that bullet time is just like a second long, or I'll just like activate it, come out, or do a jump and then do it. But it's this very specific rhythm you have to get into where you can't be exposed. You can't just be like running towards people kind of Doom style. But you also can't stay behind cover because, I mean, in this level especially, it's like those cubicles get blown apart. Like, cover is not cover for very long here. And so, it's just this very particular rhythm. And I will say one place that I think it falls apart is at the end of this level, there is just a dude who can take 40 bullets. When there's you go to the front reception desk and there are some people that get out of a van and most of them are normal, and one of them you can literally empty all of your ammo into and he'll be fine. And I still don't know how you're supposed to do that effectively. Like, I've played this game so many times, and basically the only thing that I've run into is you dual wield your pistols, you unload as much as you possibly can into him, you will get downed by him, but hopefully you have enough pills and enough time that during that you can finally knock him out.
Oh, the method I use sucks just as much ass. It's you sit in cover until he has to reload, and when he's reloading, you pop out and shoot him in the head only with like an AR. and then you just rinse and repeat like 4 different times, like trading your entire clips on each other while they're reloading.
It's just that weird. Really it's like it feels like it has such a good rhythm of just like, you know, everyone is fragile, you're fragile, the enemies are fragile, and then it's just this very bullet spongy dude, but they don't increase your survivability, and so you just
there is a moment about 5 seconds before that dude shows up, though, that is just one of the coolest moments in the game. You're in the lobby of this office building, which is just entirely giant glass windows. Like, it's just... And a Jeep full of, like, 4 paramilitary dudes drives through the front door, and you go into bullet time and shoot them as they're driving at you.
And you're somehow flung up, like... 7 to 8 feet in the air. Like, I don't know how Max gets that momentum, but he gets up there.
Yeah, it's fucking awesome. I think this level is basically, you know, we talked in the last episode about how much this game is throwing at you. It's introducing all these characters and these groups and these people, like, in very quick succession. This level feels like where the story itself starts to really take off. Like, it's like, okay, you've met all these people, you know who all these players are, here's where things really start going, because the head Bronco, whose first name I'm forgetting, is murdered in the beginning of this, and he's like kind of the anchor for a lot of this story. You're working for him. Your whole point in being in Brazil is to be employed by him and protect his family, and then he's capped like at the end of this level, and his entire office is blown up, which I think is a huge wrench in the works of the rest of the story. So, like, this is the moment I felt most excited to see where the rest of this shit goes, because it's finally stopping being like, here's this character, here's this character, here's this character, here's this character.
We've finished setting them up, and now we're gonna knock them down. Is basically
that's pretty much it.
Exactly. Yeah. And there are more characters that end up showing up, but like now it feels like I get to see all the pieces at play for the rest of the game, rather than like having to establish all these new elements.
Yeah, the first 6 chapters so far have really jumped around a lot, and there's a lot of Max talking to you, being like, this is this character, this is how I feel about them, this is how we met, this is what I'm doing for them. And right around, I think it actually happens a little earlier with the time skip in chapter 5, but you're starting to get into a more sequential order of events. Like, we're now telling, it's where like the plot really kicks in, and we're now telling a story rather than like just introducing all of the elements, as you were saying.
I do not like when you are working to get out of this burning building. I do not like that.
It feels very 2012 video game. I mean, it's like I could name a half dozen games off the top of my head, all that came out around that time, that all had kind of burning building sequences.
Yeah. I really hate those sequences, especially when they make you fight in those sequences. It's always feels like too much at once for me, and this game throws like diminishing health if you stand in one place too long, but I couldn't see through the fire where my enemies were, so I would stop and try to look for them, and then I would suffocate to death. It was very frustrating, and then kind of almost on rails itself, where you can only walk in very specific places throughout this level.
Let me say a part that I really like about this, which is actually exactly when the explosion happens. And Max realizes that there's a bomb under the desk. He runs to the balcony, and it's just such a little thing, but you would think that he would just dive off the balcony in kind of action hero thing, but he doesn't. He starts to like climb over the railing in this kind of like, I guess how I would climb over a fence, and then the bomb goes off while he's climbing over the railing, and then he gets kind of thrown to the ground. And I would assume that this game was like extensively mocapped because of how much money was behind it. And that feels very much like this isn't something a real human would do. Like, even if there's a bomb, you aren't just going to throw yourself off of like a 25-foot balcony, and instead you're going to try and lower yourself down. And just the little awkwardness of that moment, I think is just great. Like, it's just really nice and kind of cementing him as a person and not just a Terminator.
There's a really good moment with the script, like 1 or 2 minutes before that, where Max is looking at a picture of Fabiana Branco, and he's having a monologue to himself, and it's something like, I was planning to save her or whatever. But in that moment, he drops the picture, and it
the
stops
monologue's
his
like,
inner
oh, shit.
monologue, like it interrupts them. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool touches, or a lot of really great lines in this level. I like when you're trying to escort an IT guy to get the security system back online, and he's like hiding while you're doing the firefights. And after a firefight, he goes, "Are we dead?" I really love.
I was sad that they killed that kid. I felt like that was unnecessary.
Yeah, he's a good character. I like him. They kill so many innocent people. I understand killing the Bronco guy, but like they kill 2 receptionists for no reason. They kill the IT guy. But anyway, I think, is that a good place to end?
I think that's good. AJ,
It's a big cliffhanger.
Are you going to continue playing this? There's my question. Or are you like, I played my 6 chapters, I remember it, I'm good?
Well, I have a considerable amount of free time on my hands right now, so I'm certainly gonna play along and continue to listen to this wonderful entertainment product.
That wasn't a setup. I was genuinely curious.
No. I mean, like, I was actually shocked that I got my old computer running yesterday and was able to install and boot up Max Payne 3. So now that I have the means, I might as well see this bad boy through to its conclusion. Because again, I really haven't played it since it came out.
If you played the next couple chapters on a mouse and keyboard and just
I'll give it a shot.
Like, 2 sentences in the Discord or whatever of like, it felt better or it felt the same, because like I don't know if this is all
I'm an
in
idiot.
my head.
I have an old gaming laptop myself around here somewhere. I would have to rebuy the game on it, but maybe I'll give it a try too.
You're gonna have to sign up for the Rockstar Social Club, FYI, as I learned yesterday, which was far and away the hardest mechanic introduced in Max Payne 3 was getting my Rockstar Social Club login.
Well, AJ, the light of my life.
It's an honor to finally talk to you, Blake Hester.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, Jacob, I actually don't know what chapters are we doing next week.
Yeah,
next 3.
We're doing 3 chapters up until the very last 2, because there are some. What is it? I think there are 14 chapters in the game, or 16 or something. Mm-hmm. So it's a slightly uneven number. But the next level that we're doing, the next level, Max goes to Brazil. He goes in it. Yeah.
Finally. Yeah, that's right. I think we're stopping the episode also maybe a cutscene or 2 short. There's a couple of cutscenes at the end of chapter 6. I actually want to save until next episode because of a guest we're going to have on. But yeah, so if you want to play along with us, get up through chapter 9, or just watch it. I guess there's plenty of YouTube videos you could also watch.
It's a good game.
That's true. Play it on mouse and keyboard if you have the option, as I can attest to. AJ,
what's up?
You know how these shows
That's right.
end. Where you at? What are you doing? Plug away.
I'm on twitter.com @Radmir, having an unsuspended account. It's just great. I can tweet off whatever nonsense I want to. Today I was brainstorming the possibility of a Joker-fied Garfield. Just sort of, that's an image that came to me early in the morning today. Got some really great responses on that. I love being on Twitter, don't you, Jacob? I don't know, man. By the time this one comes out, there will be one more episode of the Uva Bowl miniseries podcast, and I mean, I'm excited for people to hear that. I'm also excited to watch movies by a different director for a while. If you weren't aware, this is your first time coming to Game Query, Blake and I have a side project of our side project where we are watching every single video game movie ever made, and we're trucking along. The dark days are behind us.
That's right. I'm ready to watch Silent Hill.
Fuck
baby.
yeah.
Jacob, same question.
Well, as said before, my Twitter's suspended. I saw some things while we were recording this that basically said, as of last week, there's like no one working at Twitter, that it is almost an entirely automated thing. So likely it will still be when this comes out. So go look at me on YouTube. I'm Jacob Geller. And also, I don't usually plug this, but I do have a Patreon where I release videos early and do director's commentaries and all sorts of other stuff. And since I don't have a Twitter to share my thoughts, go support me on Patreon, because having a Twitter is weirdly related to a lot of income. And now that's not happening. So do that.
Word. Yeah. I have been your host, Blake Hester, and I'll tell you what. Fitting with this podcast, you go over to Polygon.com. You find their cover stories. you read the most recent one. I went to Colombia, not recently. I saw some people in the comment sections being like, why did you get on a plane and go to Colombia during a pandemic? I want to stress, this happened months ago. It took me a while to get the article out, but I went to Colombia and profiled the founder of Angel Studios, which became Rockstar San Diego, Diego Angel. It was an interesting trip. Diego is a very interesting person who challenged me in a lot of ways as an interviewer and reporter, but I'm very proud of it. And if you're interested in this show, it's just another Rockstar story out there for you. So yeah, thanks for listening. Chapter 7, 8, and 9 next time. If you want to play along with us and you have any questions, comments, concerns, observations, tweet them at game_query or email them at gamequerypod@gmail.com. Good night.